And welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the proposal that is before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the committee, after consultation with the Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. The owner or authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. You need to state your full name and address for the record. Any materials submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairman of the committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will also be at the discretion of the committee. If there are several speakers sharing the same view, please select a spokesperson to present the group's opinion. We want to hear your views, however, covering the same points will not advance your case. The owner or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in staff reports, particularly with any proposed conditions, this is your opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into the committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of all discussion. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided at the back of this room for that purpose. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Municipal Board for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant, the owner and or agent, and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Municipal Board. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding. The Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. People attending this committee meeting are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and the other people in attendance tonight. And just to let you know that tonight's meeting will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca/live. We now ask that any cellular phones and pagers be switched off during this meeting as they tend to interfere with the audio system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charlebois. That was read with lots of authority. Matches your top too, the preamble. Okay, so no regrets this evening. We have a full complement here. Is there any declaration of any pecuniary interest? See none, we'll proceed. Is there anyone here this evening that wishes to defer or adjourn an application? Or withdraw, sorry. Yes, sir.
Good evening, committee members. For the record, my name is Greg Callahan. I present, I'm here on 47 John Street. It's 155, 2017. Received planning's comments on Friday afternoon and thus be looking for a deferral of approximately 2 weeks if possible to revise the application slightly.
Okay, is anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 155 2017 at 47 John Street? Yes, okay, there seems to be a few. I asked Mr. Callan, just turn around again. Let's see the hands. Sir, any question on deferral there, members? Okay, well, we normally grant first deferral, but you saw this show of hands. It'd be wise that you maybe convene outside, take their name and addresses, and see if you can discuss outside these chambers their concerns, and hopefully you can address them in the interim. Now, when can this matter come back?
September 19th.
September 19th is the earliest we get you on the agenda, assuming that you can get us a revised set of plans and anything back by.
They'll be in tomorrow.
Well, you need to consult first.
We will.
If you can do that between now and tomorrow, that's great, but I see that very unlikely. So we won't commit to a date. As soon as you can get your plans in, revised plans, then you'll get a date from the Secretary Treasurer.
Oh.
But the 19th, as it currently stands, is available. That depends on whether you get on or how quick you can get your plans into us.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to defer or to withdraw an application? Okay, we'll proceed with our first agenda item, and that is CAVA 68-2017 at 222 Shabutko Drive. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Sean Tusi. I'm from Mimar Architects. I'm the office principal, 2323 Youngest Street, Unit 503, Toronto. Mary for Peter, 2 Charlie 9 is my address.
Okay, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in the application CAVA 68-2017 at 222 Shabutko Drive? Okay, sir, can you proceed with the presentation?
Mr. Chairman, the proposal you have and the picture you see is of the proposal. It's a second-story addition to existing bungalow. The second floor will be built over the part of the footprint of the existing building. The excessive lot coverage is as a result of a front porch that has been added, which is this area here. And anything you see in the ground floor is basically existing portions. The GFA is as a result of the second floor being added. I will put this in to explain. So this is the site plan of the proposal. All the lines you see in terms of the footprint are the existings. And the second floor will be added over this portion here. And nothing above the garage. There is a requirement in the zoning bylaw that states if the space above the garage is over 6 meters, which I go back to the image, which refers to this height, the space above the garage, even though it is attic and is not a living space, the zoning bylaw considers that to be as a part of the GFA, even though that it is not, again, I repeat, it's not legal, it's basically an attic because it is more than 6 meters. That's how the bylaw is written. If we exclude the garage from the, to actually find out what is our effective living space in terms of comparison, that would get us to, we have a table. So this is the table that compares it. What we are applying today is not the actual GFA of the living space. If you take the garage, which is that technical, what we believe is a technical variance, it reduces to 57.67 is the actual space without the garage. This is the picture of the current house at 222, which is a 2-story. The neighborhood is a mix of 2-story and 1-story houses. This picture, the next one that I will show, is basically the picture from the side that the 222 is. So this is number 222 Chapetko, the subject property. So we have number 226, which is again a mix of, is a 2-story. We have number 228 is also a 2-story. And our proposal basically will be actually adding to a story, which will be matching with what we have on that side of the street. The next picture would be what we have across the street is number 236, which is again a 2-story. And number 234 is not very clear, but as you might see here, is a 2-story. Again, 233, even in terms of the design, is fairly similar. As you see, we have the entrance here. Number 231 again is 2-story. These are right immediately across the street from the subject property. 229 is 2-story. 227 is 2-story, as well as a 225. During the design phase, the idea was, because we have a mixture of 2-story and 1-story, the idea was to have a design that is it becomes some sort of a transitional from between bungalow and two-story. So our second story is somewhat incorporated into the attic, looking like a bungalow to not only match with the existing character, but also keep it more in control and not to have a straight walls going two-story out in terms of the street escapes. We believe the variances are minor. We believe the GFA is more technical in terms of the number you see, but in terms of the impact and the massing and the scale, we're not changing the footprint. The increase in GFA doesn't create any other variances such as height or rear yard setback or even side yard setback. The side yard setback you have is only 5 centimeter as a result of existing ground floor. Unfortunately, we couldn't push the second floor in. It would structurally it would make things much more complicated. So we believe this proposal meets the 4 tests, and we respectfully request your approval. Any question, I would be happy to answer.
Any questions? Mr. Charlebois?
Going back to those pictures of the houses, I do note that you're putting forward that they're all 2 stories, and I think that's fine. I mean, 2 stories are permitted. But the real question I guess I would have, and I'm not sure if you've got this data, is of those houses, how did they do with respect to the zoning? Did they require variances? Did they? I don't have anything that says that they did or didn't. So the fact that a 2-story was built is fine, but are they exceeding the GFA? Are they exceeding the lot coverage?
I don't have that answer,
Okay.
Mr. Chalman.
All right, thanks.
Okay, just a couple questions. Can you put those pictures back for a second?
So this is from the same side where we have 222, and then the other line of pictures.
Okay, so
was the cross.
226, the addition is not over the garage, it's over the built form. 228, the addition includes over the garage. Go down the street. Okay. 234.
We have above the garage. Here we have above the garage. Here we don't, but we do.
See, that was my impression when I did my site visits, that it's a 50-50 split. Some of them have the addition over the garage, some of them do not. So I wanted to get a little bit of understanding, because it seems to go to variance number 3. It says the maximum lot coverage shall be 35%, where the detached dwelling is greater than 7 meters in height. So if the dwelling was less than 7 meters in height, then you can exceed the 35%. Am I reading it right?
Well, the space above the garage is, I believe, either 6 or 7. Then it wouldn't count as a part of the GFA. So we don't have any living space above the garage. It's basically an attic, empty space.
No, but this variance number 3 says a maximum lot coverage. We're talking about lot coverage. Shall be 35%, where the detached dwelling is greater than 7 meters in height.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think what it means is referring to the overall height of the structure. So if the whole detached unit is let's say 7 meter, then probably it's a different number. If the question is what is that number?
If it's greater than 7, you have a maximum of 35% coverage. I guess it's trying to relate the massing with the coverage. It says that if you're greater than 7, we're going to cut down on your coverage. We don't want you to have coverage because it creates a massing that's probably not compatible. And your point goes to, I think, variance number 2. Areas above the garage that are greater than 6 meters are counted in the floor area ratio.
Yes, exactly. But what I would have in terms of the number 3 is that if you look at the lot coverage, basically the lot coverage counts from these areas. But what we have in the second floor, we have this roof going all the way to the side, and then on this side we also have it this way. So really, the part that goes over the 7 meter, or at least the impact you have, it might be, let's say, if this height. Let me check what is our height currently, Mr.
Well, no,
Chair.
but don't. I think.
So the idea is that if let's say this is 7 meter, the part that is really going over 7 meter is a very little portion. We try to create that bungalow feeling so that it reduces any impact it has. It completely reduces the mass impact.
No, I don't think that's what my question is. The variance number 3 that deals with coverage
Yes.
says if you're over 7 meters, then you're restricted to 35% coverage.
Yes, that is correct.
Your other point is, for variance number 2, you're telling us that if an area over the garage is greater than 6 meters, then you count that as part of your GFA,
You're correct.
although it's non-usable space.
That is correct.
And so you pointed to that left portion. Yeah, so is that entire second floor? Like, can you circle what areas are not usable, roughly?
Yeah, so this is the usable. This is a fake window. So from here is a usable. From here is basically, this space is an attic.
Okay, so that attic space, because it's greater than 6 meters in height?
Exactly, yes, because basically this height, they see this height is more than 6 meter, then they will count this.
So what's
as
the
a
total
GF.
height of your dwelling? 9 meters.
Is 8 point, yes, it's basically a,
It shows on your plans 9 meters.
yes, it's 9 meter, and I show the front. So this is basically the front. So
9
if this
meters.
is the 9 meter, so probably 7 meter would become this part. So the part that goes over 7 meter. And what I'm trying to say is that from the front, from the side, and even from this side, these are the dormers. So we're pushing the house to second floor. We're even making it, even though we're building it right above the second floor, we're making it a smaller, plus nothing is going over the side. So instead of, let's say, building a square, like what you would see, for instance, here, if that's clear, so instead of, let's say, what you see here, we basically, in our design, we're doing it like this, something that significantly reduces the impact. It doesn't show it in the number of the lot coverage, but technically, the impact in terms of the massing is much less. It's significantly less than the number that we see there. And then if you look at the floor plan,
No, I understand all that, but I'm just trying to get a grip on your, frankly, Mr. Gabe, I've never, maybe it's a new provision under 2014-14 that says if you're greater than 6 meters above the attic space, then it's counted, but I've never seen that as a variance, and I've just wanted to see visually what the gentleman is saying.
Mr. Chairman, I think what the applicant had illustrated in a particular chart that he had shown was the residential floor area ratio as
Right.
well. And that was one of the things that staff was looking at, was that quantum to go from 43% up to 63%. And that, I think, was the substantial variance that staff had a concern with.
Right,
The-
and his proposition is, if you exclude that area over the garage, which happens to be more than 6 meters, it's counted, then the true variance is 57%.
Right. And that it was still excessive beyond the 43% that is currently permitted in the
That's what I was
bylaw.
trying to get a handle with, whether that made a difference in the staff's position or view.
It did not.
Okay, those are my questions. Any follow-up questions? Okay,
this
sir,
is
if you,
the second floor, Mr. Chair. So
Right.
this is the space that is being calculated, but is technically is just the attic space, and that's the fake window that you see in the
Right.
pictures.
okay, so if you just have a seat nearby, and then we'll invite you back in a minute. So I saw a show of hands. Who would like to come down first? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, or good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is George Espy, and I live at 199 Arishat Road in Oakville, and my property is behind the applicant's property. And I'd like to raise some of the concerns that we have about the structure that is being proposed on this lot.
So you're at 199?
Yes, that's, I believe it's lot 136 on the plot of survey.
Sorry, you're at 199?
Arishat,
Okay, Arshat, okay. Just want to find you on the map here, okay?
yes.
Thank you.
So our lot is behind the proposed building.
Right.
And it, as a result of the topology, sits about 1.3 to 1.8 meters below the ground level of 222 Chivocto. And so with the new proposed 9-meter tall building, this is going to have the effect of raising the roof of the structure to something in the neighborhood of 10.3 to 10.8 meters above our lot. And so this obviously has some concern for us because it's going to block out the sky, it's going to cast large shadows, and the addition of second-story windows, in addition to the increase in height, will mean that they will be perched above our yard and the neighbor's yard, looking down and eliminating the privacy that we now experience. But equally of concern is that the lot at 222 Chubbucto is fairly small. It's 418 meters. The zoning bylaw permits maximum residential floor area of about 180 meters squared, and the variance proposes a 263 or 264 meters square residential floor area. So this change actually represents 1.47-fold increase, or a 47% increase in the residential floor area over what's permitted by the current bylaw. So if we were to look at this in another perspective, if I was to accommodate the new 264 meter floor area, I would need to have a residential lot that occupied something like 614 meters squared. Or in other words, I'd have to take about half of the neighbor's lot in order to satisfy the current bylaw. So that seems to me to be a massive increase. Now, given that in relationship to the enhanced porch, the large eaves above the building, and it contributes to excessive mass, excessive scaling, particularly for us in the back where we don't see the street level view but the back level view. That's one of the big distinctions that's not taken into the design account. So there are also, for these reasons, we believe that the requested variance is not a minor variance, and that it does not maintain the general intent of the bylaw, because the form of the new structure does not maintain a reasonable scale, massing, or residential floor area that's consistent with the character of the neighborhood. Now, I'd also like to address the fact that in the documents, the comment documents, there were 8 letters that indicated support for this proposal. I would like to actually contest those letters because I think that those letters actually need to have the same level of sophistication and caliber, the same standard that letters of objection have. These letters of support basically say something in a vague and unclear manner that they looked at the application, yeah, okay, it's fine, no problem. But we don't know really what they read. We don't know what they were presented with. In fact, we don't know how many people were asked to sign the letter and refused. So this level of consent that is prescribed here is really not the same level of consent that is required for the letters of objection. They're not the same caliber, they're not the same level. And so I respectfully contend that they are not really valuable letters of support in terms of the application. So thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Espy? Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for your thorough comments. Who else would like to speak to the committee? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a copy of my comments, just one copy, and also on a thumb drive. So if you want to keep it as a record, feel free to do that. Okay, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Ho Wong, 230 Chubbucto Drive. I've been living there for 30 years. I'm speaking in support of town staff's conclusion that the proposed application does not meet the test for approval. I will address from the perspective of resident the 4 criteria this committee uses in considering the merit of the application. Criterion number 1, does the application maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? According to town zoning bylaw, this neighborhood is zoned RL3, which has a minimum lot area of 557.5 square meter and a minimum frontage of 18 meters. This can be reduced for an individual lot as long as the averages for the entire plan of subdivision are not below these minimums. The subject property has a lot area of 418.1 square meter, which is 25% below the subdivision's minimum average, and a frontage of 13.7 meter, which is 24% below the minimum. The subdivision was built in the early 1970s. The residential floor areas of the houses in the area range from about 115 to 250 square meters. To answer the earlier question from one committee member, I'm not aware of any variances that has been passed that will change a single story to a 2-story. I'm not aware of that. I've been living there 30 years. The existing structure has a residential floor area of 119 square meter. The application seeks a maximum of 264 square meter, which is 122% increase. Under the current bylaw, the owner could build up to 180 square meter, adding more than 50% to the existing floor area without the need for a minor variance. The proposal, if approved, will result in a dwelling that will be one of the largest in terms of floor area, if not the largest in the neighborhood, on a small lot that is 25% below the average minimum size, with a frontage 24% below the minimum. In my view, the scale of development of the proposal is not compatible with the adjacent dwellings and surrounding dwelling in the neighborhood, and therefore does not meet the requirement of section 11.1.9A of the official plan. Criterion number 2, does the application maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? A dwelling of 264 square meter, in my judgment, would be one intended to accommodate at least 3 or 4 adults, which will translate in an area with very limited public transit services to a similar number of vehicles parked overnight. The proposed plan shows a single-car garage and a 2.9 meter wide driveway that can accommodate 1 extra vehicle. My observation is that the proposal, if approved, will result in a dwelling where the parking provision is not functionally adequate for the new residential floor area of 264 square meter that may entail the need for more than 2 parking spaces. This demonstrates the importance of upholding the zoning bylaw, which limits the floor to lot area ratio to 43%, or the floor area to a maximum of 180 square meter, thus striking a balance between floor area and available on-site parking space. The application, therefore, does not maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. Criterion number 3, is the variance desirable for the appropriate development and use of land? We have lived in the neighborhood for 3 decades and have seen over the years turnovers of residents with kids growing up, empty nesters moving on, replaced by younger families, but physically, there have been few changes. What I'm concerned about is that if this proposal is approved, it will send a signal that increases in floor area to lot area ratio of this scale from 43% to 63% is acceptable for this neighborhood and lends support to similar future applications. Cumulatively and over time, this would alter the character of the area with supersized dwellings and inadequate on-site parking. It's my view the variance is not desirable for the appropriate development and use of land in this neighborhood. Criterion number 4, is the variance minor in scale? The increase in maximum floor area from 180 to 264 square meter represents a 47% change. This is not minor in magnitude, nor in the context of the negative impact the increase may create. In closing, I ask the committee to give significant weight to the comments and conclusion of staff, which is in the best position to interpret official plan policies and zoning bylaw regulations. I agree with staff that the application does not pass the test for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Any questions of Mr. Wong? Okay. Thank you for your very thorough planning submissions.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the committee on this matter?
Good evening. My name is Janet Haslett Thiel. I'm the president of the Joshua Creek Residents Association. I live at 2242 Constance Drive in Oakville, L6J5L7. I'm here on behalf of the Joshua Creek Residents Association, which monitors requests for minor variances and the town's comments. We have a board passed policy that talks about that development should be within the bylaws that govern development, redevelopment, and accessory buildings unless extenuating circumstances such as grandfathered boundaries exist. The goal of our involvement will always be to ensure that variances are not being granted that will change the streetscape or the character of our neighborhood or set future precedents. And in particular, tonight, we're concerned about the future precedent. This includes also protecting tree canopy, a feeling of spaciousness, enjoyment of surrounding properties, and designs which are consistent with the character of the neighborhood as a whole. JCRA has worked with the town and other residents association in regards to protections for stable residential neighborhoods to ensure there's reasonable regulations in regards to development. We're not commenting today against one property owner or another. We're not against individuals enhancing or making changes to their property as long as those changes are consistent with the character of the neighborhood and are only minor in nature at most. It can be very difficult for neighbors to speak out against a proposed development, though that two individuals that have spoken tonight have done an outstanding job of explaining why this application should be denied. We're here tonight to remind you that this application is not minor. The town planning staff has done a thorough job of explaining why the application should be denied, and in particular, they reflect on the orientation and siting of the dwelling, its existing projection into the rear yard, the additional floor area on the second floor exacerbating the condition, and it really does introduce massing and scale that's not consistent with the neighborhood. They also go on to talk about the fact that the front porch coverage and the lot coverage contributes to some of these issues. So when they conclude that it doesn't meet or maintain the intent of the livable Oakville or the official plan, we concur. It also is not minor in nature. I want to just reflect on a couple things. The gentleman that presented on behalf of the owners talks about the garage and how he feels that certain elements shouldn't be considered. But in fact, they do create a sense of mass and scale that is overwhelming for that street. And it's interesting that the houses shown don't show the bungalows that are curving around the other side. He's only shown on the one part of the street. The topography of this property, the surrounding houses, are going to be impacted by the design. Immediate neighbors have said that they object. We hope that you will take their voice seriously. We also want to just comment that they can go back and they can find a design that will be much closer to the bylaws or within the bylaws, and that should be the direction that the board provides. Thank you.
Submissions, any comments? Any questions? I mean, see none. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the committee? Please.
My name is Rosanna Tambury, and I'm one of the homeowners of 227 Chebucto Drive. And I just wanted to state that I support the decision taken by the town staff, and for the same reasons outlined in their letter and for the speakers that came before me.
Thank you. Thank you for being succinct and to the point and eliminating the duplication that we talked about earlier. On that basis, I guess we don't have any questions for you. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, hang on. Yes, sir.
My name is Mina Gwani. I'm with my wife.
Ah,
Sandra
you're the
Gwani.
landowners.
Yes,
Yeah,
we are.
so we're the owners.
Yes. Okay, so is there anything that your agent architect said that, that you need, like, we're not gonna allow you to double dip in terms of your presentation, although
yeah.
Okay.
in fairness, we should give you an
Yeah.
opportunity to,
So I just wanted to make it clear to everyone sitting here and to our neighbors that we went back and forth with multiple designs in order to try to satisfy a lot of our neighbors. I know many of the people who signed, who support us, are not here because I went door to door talking to them, and I said that by signing this would suffice. Our neighbors directly to the left of us are very happy to have another younger couple move in. We have a little girl and another baby on the way, so moving into this place, it would be for our future. We're not trying to ask for too much, at least as Sean explained. A lot of the technicality is in there. I know there's a side variance that might seem like we're adding to the lot coverage when we really aren't trying to do that. I think it was explained that it was built very similar to what the variance is right now, so we had to present it. Above the garage, we could show you the second floor, how it's going to look like. It's absolute void space, as the architect explained. We wish that people would take into consideration all the work that we've put into this. We've deferred it, I believe, at least once, and we spent a lot of time to try to please as many neighbors as possible. I've spoken to neighbors who are not happy with it, who've changed their minds. I believe there was a letter or an email that was sent after we changed our design, and they said, okay, now we're happy with it. So you could see all the effort that we've put in, that our architect put in, and we just wanted everyone to take this into consideration as well.
And we're also coming into the neighborhood and we're hoping to really enhance the neighborhood. We're not hoping to come in and build something that will change the look of the neighborhood, but we want to increase the value and increase, you know, the way that the neighborhood looks.
okay,
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Make it very quick. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we listened to the neighbors. We, as the owner said, there has been an effort. We deferred it ourselves once. This is the third time we're reducing the proposal. It was our understanding that at least this, because it's going over the same footprint, was acceptable for the planning. I have one of my staff here. When did we get the planning, Lucy, the comments from planning staff? It was on Friday, I believe. Yeah, it was on Friday, so it wasn't enough time for us. We were kind of surprised by Friday afternoon. So I would like to, we heard the neighbors. We know what their concerns are, all the specific ones that came here today. And I would like to propose that we defer the application, giving us the chance to get their phone number, talk to them, to see how we could reduce the proposal. So I would like to propose to defer the application if possible.
Isn't this what
Mr.
we did the
Chairman.
last time, went through the whole presentation and deferred at the end again? Isn't that what we did?
No,
Maybe
this
on
is
a
the
different
first time here in front of you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I thought you
For
said you
this
would-
case.
Oh, for this particular
Yes.
property? Because I recall you were here on another matter and we went through the whole presentation and then you reluctantly deferred it at the end. Am I mistaken?
Well,
Anyways, it doesn't matter. So you're, based
the
on what
first
you
time.
just heard, you're thinking that a deferral might be helpful.
yes, Mr. Chairman.
It would have been helpful to have that discussion in the beginning when you saw the comments from staff, but let's just see what I'm in my committee's hands. I don't make unilateral decisions. Members, there's a request for deferral. I think under the circumstances, we've heard the submissions, and it'd be in fairness to those in attendance that we sort of reflect on what the deferral would benefit and consider the request by the agent and give a decision on the deferral before we proceed on the application. So who would like to move the discussion on that? In fact, I'm inviting a discussion on it. How long would you think a deferral would be required, sir?
I believe since we have heard all the comments, So the only thing would be that we reduce the idea would be to reduce the variances. Most likely we'll eliminate that 6 meter above the garage, we're thinking. We also reduce the back, so it takes care of the comments from the
Okay,
neighbor
why don't you just have a
privacy.
seat? I want to poll those that already spoke to the matter, because it seems like, you know, they're all saying that this proposal is not what they're looking for. It almost suggests that there's an opportunity for discussion. We don't have the power to mediate settlements, we have a power to make a decision. So if a deferral provides for the opportunity to speak to the neighbors and find a consensus among everyone, that obviously benefits everyone. So let me just ask those who wish to come before the committee and speak to the deferral request to please proceed on the basis. If you don't speak to the deferral request, we'll assume there's a general acknowledgement that deferral would be a benefit to the community and to the, I mean, the whole idea of these proceedings is to find a resolution, whether it's by deferral or by other means. You know, often it's better to have a local solution than people spending their time and efforts in other areas where they can have a decision forced on them. So on the basis no one's coming forward, sure.
So we've already heard all of the arguments, and what the gentleman indicates is that it needs to be a substantive redesign of the building
Right.
in order to meet the progress.
Well,
So
I don't know if there's a
simply,
I don't know if there's a standard redesign. I have no idea what's in the gentleman's head.
well,
but
no, but in order to reduce the footprint and reduce the floor area, there's a requirement for a fundamental redesign of the structure. And if we go ahead and say, okay, well, we'll try and work it out, and we'll do this, and we'll do that, and we disagree at the end, then we're back at the same position. So I would suggest that we just simply say the proposal is dead, and they submit a new application. And if the building does not meet the bylaws, then they apply for a new variance.
Well, here's the issue. It's a couple of issues that flow from that discussion. The first one being is unless there's dialogue, it's always no, just let me finish. Unless there's dialogue, the proposals are coming forward on one side. You know, they're trying to second guess what's in the community's head in terms of what's acceptable. That's the first point, the first thing. The second point is, if you're coming from their proposition, they should meet the strict requirements of the zoning bylaw. Perhaps you're right, there's no need for a discussion. We should make a decision and parties take their guidance from whatever decision we make. So a deferral implies that there will be dialogue with the community. But if the positions are so diametrically opposed that stick to the requirements of the bylaw strictly versus, well, we'll consider some variances, you know, then it's a different discussion.
So I don't understand then if we come to a new proposal and there's a new set of plans that are
There'll be new
developed.
circulation and another opportunity to address those plans. What I guess the advantage is what they gain is that they're not reapplying again and paying the fees again for that.
I see.
So there would
Okay.
be a deferral fee, but the application remains alive in that sense, and then it will come back revised, or maybe not. I don't know. We don't know. But we certainly can proceed and make a decision, and the parties are off to do whatever they want.
So I didn't understand. the
No,
fact
no,
that
that's
there
why
was
we're
an
having this
increase
discussion. I
in
wanted
the
to have
fee.
that dialogue with you.
So, I mean, it was indicated that there was already community consultation.
That's what
but
I heard too.
I was not included in that community consultation. I don't know if Mr. Wong was included in that.
Well, I think
community,
maybe the
nor-
I
I'm
think
right
the
behind.
neighbor went around and spoke to some, but maybe not to
Yeah.
everyone. Of course,
Yes,
the interests are varied, and
that's right.
Not
But
a-
it was, the people who were contacted were not all the immediate neighbors.
sure.
And so this is where the situation has arisen, is because we had no idea of the size or scale of the proposed building until we received the application for a variance. And this is why we now are here to object, is because there was that lack of consultation.
Sure, if we proceed to a decision on this, there's no requirement that the owner abandon the application and start all over again. They probably
No.
proceed with the appeal and try to revise it on appeal, and then everyone's off to other tribunals to get a decision. And if it seems like you're well connected with the community, it sounds like there's an opportunity for the dialogue to continue wherever it goes.
Well, we're certainly not adverse to dialogue and coming up with a building. I mean,
Okay.
there's a number of excellent designs on the street already that have
Sure.
undergone renovations and
Sure.
meet the code.
I totally agree.
So
Okay, so
I-
on
I
that
won't,
basis, members, a deferral request, is all those in agreement based on what we heard? A discussion on it? Seeing none, all those in support, Mr. Telesky, yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to support deferral, but I think it needs discussion.
Yes.
And I think that the applicant needs to hear the discussion.
Yes.
You know, notwithstanding, we don't like going through 45 minutes and taking up everybody's time and then have a deferral when there's opportunity to do it at the beginning of the meeting. But, Mr. Chair, I think this is close, in my opinion. You know, I have to recognize that, you know, there's more neighbors in support than have come out tonight to speak against it, and unlike the one neighbor said, I cannot assume that the people in support did not pay the same attention to it that you did, sir, although clearly you've put a lot of work into it. Mr. Chair, I think it is a really good attempt at a sympathetic design, but it's too big. You know, the interesting part of these houses, when you look at it from an air photo, the two-story houses are essentially, you know, squares or just off squares. The bungalows go deeper into the lot. I think where I'm having problem with this proposal is that while you've done an excellent job with the front of the house, your house goes deeper into the lot, much closer to the neighbor behind you than the house to the other side that's a two-story, and yet that section of the house is a full 2 stories, will be very imposing. There's no masking the mass of the building in the rear yard. So, Mr. Chair, I do believe this house is too big as it's proposed. The neighborhood seems to be split on it. I think it needs to get a little smaller if it's coming back, but I'm prepared to give them the opportunity. But I think if we're going to do this, the applicant needs to hear if there's concerns on the part of the committee.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone else wishing to speak to the deferral request? Seeing none. Okay, so the motion is to defer the agent's request after hearing the deputations. All those in support? Okay, no one opposed. Sir, we're not going to fix a date. We ask next time if there's a deferral. This is for everyone, you know, that you see a staff report, canvass the community. You ask for a deferral in the beginning. We could have actually saved some time. But in fairness, I think you've kind of learned something today, and you have the temperature of the community that you should work with. Okay, so we won't fix a date. You have the names and addresses, and we'll wait for you to return when you feel it's necessary. Oh yeah, there's a deferral fee. I think you know the drill. Yeah.
Thank you.
Something like $1 million. Can't remember what it was. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, the members.
Thank you. Good luck. Okay, so we'll proceed then on, and again, thank you for everyone that attended, and sorry for the turnout and the end result, but I think there's opportunity for the community here to find a resolution, and hopefully everyone can work together. So we'll proceed on CAVA 151-2017 at 2055 Devon Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bill Hicks with Hicks Design Studios, 295 Robinson Street, Suite 200. And I'm certainly prepared to make a presentation. I know that planning is supporting it. There's no letters of discontent from the neighbors, and we did hand out packages to all of them, but I do know that Mr. Bird is here. He may want to speak to it. So.
Okay, well, let's see who's here that needs to speak to the matter. This is an application, CAVA 151-2017 at 2055 Devon Road. Okay, there's a show of hands. Whoever would like to come down first can come on down. Someone's got to start the ball rolling.
Well, I'll do my presentation first if you'd like. So.
Well, let's just see. I mean, yeah, well, we can do that. Sir, are you concerned on any particular variance, or is it just generally the whole concept? Generally the whole. Okay, then we'll have Mr. You can come close, but we'll have Mr. Hicks go through a presentation. So then you can be ready to speak to us when he's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here tonight to seek two variances for a new house being built on Devon Road. The two variances are number one for coverage and number two for gross floor area. I'll deal with the coverage one first. I know planning has certainly looked at this application with us. What I've shown on the overhead here is that the coverage really relates to a one-story porch that's at the back of the property. A little larger than some of the covered porches we have put on other properties. It was a request of the client himself. It is not enclosed space, however, and as I say, that has taken us over the allowable coverage. The actual house itself is under the allowable coverage that's permitted on the site. The second variance is related to gross floor area, and the floor area that it's exceeding by is over top of the garage. And actually, when in the last application, when you had said that you hadn't heard of the
6 meter.
the 6 meter,
I read it.
I've been
I'm now
dealing with this
informed.
with I've been dealing with this with the zoning department ever since the
New
bylaw was written, not quite understanding how it could be interpreted that way, but I've lost all those interpretations. In this case,
It seems to be that if the garage includes an attic space that's not usable, it's all counted as part of the garage, and that's counted as part of GFA.
that's right.
That's my take on reading it.
That's exactly what it is, and I think
Yeah.
that arose out of a number of applications in the past 5-10 years where people would put attics above garages with dormers.
Yeah, I
in,
can
and then-
understand the intent of that provision.
And then come back and ask for the committee's
Yep.
support, and I was certainly one of those ones that came back
On the
a
basis
number of
that it
times.
doesn't change anything on the outside appearance, so staff have now made that the intent. They specified it fairly clearly why they don't want it.
That's right, so.
Yeah.
So in this case, we are putting some space on top of the garage. We're forced to count all of the space on top of the garage, even though we're only using a portion of it. That is a portion of the reason for being over the allowable gross floor area. It's not the entire reason for it. But we have made steps to mitigate any impact of that by reducing the mass of that portion of the house. And I think planning made comments in their report as well. We've also stepped the house back on this property line, so it doesn't follow a 2.4 meter setback from front to back. It actually goes up to over 8 meters at the back portion of the house in terms of the side yard setbacks. So we feel that certainly by stepping the garage roof down, notwithstanding the fact that we have to count the area within it, certainly complies to the official plan and the infill design guidelines in terms of trying to step the house down towards adjacent houses. There is a new house on the right side of the property. There's an existing one-story house on this, so there is a gesture to try and step that roof height down. I was actually surprised that there were a number of people here to speak tonight, because we did hand out packages to all of the surrounding neighbors, as we have always done, and I encouraged them to call me or have a discussion with me to see if we could deal with any concerns that they might have. So I've not had a chance to hear any of those, and I don't believe as of this afternoon there's even any letters from any neighbors in opposition to it. So my position, Mr. Chairman, is it certainly complies to the 4 tests. Coverage is a simple one in my mind, that it's simply a one-story porch that's making it exceed it. And the gross floor area is compounded by the fact that we are using a portion of the space on top of the garage, but we have to count the entire space. It's interesting in this zoning bylaw, if the lot was actually 60 meters less in area, I could build a larger house, because your 37% goes 39%. So it's an unusual sliding scale in the bylaw that at some point in time you change the size of the lot by 10 meters and you can actually build 200 square feet less on a smaller lot, or 200 square feet more on a smaller lot. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it open to any questions from yourself. As I say, we've seen the planning report. We certainly support the fact that any condition or any approval would be tied to these particular drawings, which we fully intend to build. So,
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Any questions? Okay, see none. We invite you to remain close by, and we'll
I
start
shall.
the first presentation from where we would like to approach us first. Sir?
This is a new thing for me, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Council. I'm Ken Lytle, 2049 Devon Road, and representing 7 of us up here today.
Okay.
They're planning on building a house beside me. We have a string of ranch-style homes that we moved into 60-some years ago, and we've been there for that length of time. We're requesting that the bylaw 2014-014 zone RL20 be adhered to. If allowed, the variance will cut off the sight lines from our yards that we have had for the last 62 years after losing our home in Hazel on 54. Already large homes built in the last 2 to 5 years are looking down on our single ranch-style homes, six-room homes from the back, taking away privacy that we used to enjoy. We raised 5 children in this house, and we are here to stay. We have a great neighbors, and if all we want is to stick to the bylaws, and we will have no complaints. That's the feeling of the group that have come here today.
Thank you, sir. I mean, here's my dilemma. There's a reason why the province of Ontario, so far, they may change, has asked that there be a committee of adjustment set up. And it's not mandatory.
No.
The town can say, we don't want a committee of adjustment, and they can choose not to have one to vary their bylaw. But in this instance, like in many municipalities, they put in committee of adjustment to deal with minor variances, and our job is to determine through a decision if it meets the 4 tests. By asking us to, refuse an application effectively and tell them to work within the zoning bylaw means there's no need for a committee of adjustment. That's the dilemma we have.
Right,
So although
right.
we understand your position that you prefer that there be no change beyond the zoning bylaw, anyone in the town of Oakville has a right to make an application so far. That may change, but so far they have a right to make an application before the committee, and then we're here to judge whether it meets the 4 tests. Now, I understand you're on 2049, you're the single-story house, but we heard most of the improvements are to the rear, to the rear view, and there is that addition over the garage, which we heard of. And so we're trying to take all that information and relate it back to your property to determine what the impacts are.
Right.
We don't have
that
an easy
house-
job for being volunteers.
No, that house, when they build that, is moved back, so far back in the lot, that when we come out, the house is going to be there. My pool's there. I can't see anything that we used to be able to see, flowers, trees, everything down both sides of the property like we can on the other side, because those houses are still there. There's 3 of us in a row that have not been taken down and replaced by huge mansions. I know it's a sign of the times, and
Well, I'm not quite sure that's the case, but, there's always, people want to always improve their properties. I guess that's benefits everyone in the area. But with that comes this ability to find the right balance.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Is there any questions? Thank you, Mr. Michael.
Welcome.
I speak?
Of course.
My name is Fred Klein. I'm at 2043 Devon Road, right next to Ken.
Fred Klein
Yes.
at
The chairman, members of the board. 2043. It's
43.
2
Okay,
houses
you're
over.
one over from Mr.
Yes.
Michael.
Now, we moved in here 1965, 52 years ago. We raised our families. just
That's
like
when the
our
Leafs won the
neighbor did.
Stanley Cup the last time, too.
Huh?
That's the last time the Leafs won the Stanley Cup.
So we planted trees and shrubs. We look after the wild birds. We love the environment. We're not against progress, or it has to be made, but we just ask that the environment stays close to what it used to be. The bylaws make sense to us. They're reasonable. All we ask is that they abide by the bylaws. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Appreciate your efforts to come here tonight to help us with that decision. Who else would like to speak to the committee on this? Okay, Mr. Hicks, back to you. Is there anyone else? Oh, hang on, Mr. Bird.
I didn't get the package, and the reason for that is I own the property, but the property is tenanted.
Yes.
So that I'll have to talk to them, things like that.
So we need your name and address for the record.
Should pass it around. It's Keith Bird. I'm the owner of 2067 Devon
Okay.
Road, and have been for Owned that for about the last 10 or 15 years. Bought it from a Mr. Metcalf. Some of them would know that. Anyway, my concern was tonight Bill showed me the drawings. My true concern was, and he explained why the gross floor area in the garage, and I appreciate cleaning that up, because what happened in the past, and they had the thing is the open space or an attic became, later on got winterized, or it became part of another bedroom or a flat up the stairs. So admit what it is. From the street it looks like a room. It is a room, just not occupied. Which brought me to the second part, which is I think discretionary, which is looks like it says a covered porch at the back. Well, the same thing sort of happens. A porch or a patio becomes a canopy, becomes winterized, and sooner or later, I think they call them all-season rooms or whatever it is, a sunroom.
Florida
and because of or Florida room or whatever it is. So what assurance do we have if it is going to be the same thing, sort of, I guess, rezoning by stealth to get a bigger property, that the extra space, it remains what it's supposed to be. It's not to be part of the livable floor plan. It is sort of a covered patio. It strikes me that it doesn't become a livable floor space. And is that, and I guess through you to Bill, is that discretionary, the size of that? It looks quite massive, given that the size of the existing house is about 1,300 square feet, and we're building a patio that's about a third of that.
Well, I mean, I think Mr. Hicks said admittedly he's built smaller ones. This is on a larger scale of what he's
Well,
proposed.
that's discretion of the committee. If you withhold the bylaw, he wouldn't have it at all. So is there some discretion on the size of the deal, or an undertaking that property will not become usable floor area?
Well, okay, undertakings are legal terms. Assurances, we can't assure anything, just much like,
So
but
is
I think what we do, Mr. Bird.
Your decisions are legal terms too.
Oh, I know, but what we do, Mr. Bird, is we make it conditional on the plans. So if the plans showed an uncovered roof, an uncovered platform, then it's uncovered, and in the future, someone decides to cover it, that would be a zoning violation. So that's how it works.
Well, either it's part of the gross floor area or it's not.
Well, I think it, Mr. Hicks, any questions of Mr. Bird before he leaves? No. Mr. Hicks is, again, just to confirm, is that covered porch?
Yes.
Is that part of the gross floor area?
No, it's not included in gross floor area. It is included in coverage.
Right.
I can answer the question, certainly to enclose it, and there's no intent to work by stealth methods to create a space and then put windows into it. There's no way of getting heating into it. You'd have to rip up the slabs. We'd have to get a separate building permit for it, and we'd be back before this committee again for an increase in gross floor area. So my clients don't have a problem with giving an undertaking to say it's not going to be enclosed with a windows and doors. It's not a normal thing for the committee to ask for.
Well, no, we're not asking for it. You can give an undertaking if you like. It's on the record anyways. These things are recorded, and they'll forever be available on the interweb.
Well, I think, as I say, it's dictated by the obtaining and requiring a building permit if he makes any modifications to that portion of the building. So certainly, if I can answer just quickly in terms of the other two presenters, I think it was Ken and Mr. Klein. As I say, I was surprised I hadn't heard from them before. I've heard their comments. I think succinctly that there is a concern with simply asking for any variances, but I know in the next door neighbor at 2049, I always look at this myself as an architect and say, well, if I'm going to ask for a variance of one thing, what else can I do to help improve the situation or improve the design? And in this case, we've specifically stepped the building back, as I had noted in my presentation. We're actually allowed to build all the way back to there with one straight wall, so we've tried to.
Well, not really, because then you have coverage issues, right?
No, I mean, in terms of I could change the shape of the house, but I'm allowed to do that. But we haven't exceeded any heights. We've more than exceeded the side yard setbacks. We've certainly exceeded the front and rear yard setbacks. We haven't gone over a maximum depth provision. So I think that part of the additional floor area, and as I said, we've tried to build it into a one-story roof line as opposed to building 2 stories on top of the garage, or a full 2 stories. And not asking for any height variances. So some of that, in my own mind, helps to offset that. if you look at, as of right, what you're allowed to build within the bylaw, it could have been a worst-case scenario for the neighbor on the west side. And I know he's losing some view, and it's certainly the intent of these owners is to preserve as many trees as possible. There is one that's adjacent to the property line, but the other ones are all being preserved. And there'll certainly be a detailed landscape plan that's done as part of this. So I know there's the concern that one small change is going to set in motion a number of all other changes in the neighborhood, but I believe we've tried to respect what is happening on the neighbor's house, and that it does conform to the tests, and it is actually a desirable solution within the context of the neighborhood. So.
Thank you, sir. We'll take this back to committee. Members, we had a very thorough discussion on this one. Remind you, this is your first decision tonight. We're now almost 10 minutes into the hearing. This is our first decision. So who would like to move a recommendation? We can have a discussion on this application.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move a motion and put it forth for discussion before my colleagues. I mean, as much as I sympathize with the opposing neighbors that who have been in the neighborhood for the long haul and for over 40 years, some veterans in the neighborhood over 52 years, I commend them and respect their opinions. But as one of them mentioned, their change is inevitable and it will come. I'm satisfied by the presentation that Mr. Hicks put through. I do concur with staff that these changes that are requested before us are within reason and have met the 4 tests and desirable for the development of the land. I feel that the incorporation of some of the elements of the second floor into the roof line make it compatible for the rest of the neighborhood, and I'm satisfied that the issues with the covered porch that are going to be dealt with in terms of our condition that the drawings as submitted maintain the intent of the development, and that the extra space that is included in the coverage and with respect to the calculations above the garage area as well as the covered porch actually explains the 2 variances that are before us. So having said that, I will note the objections from some of the neighbors, and I will move a motion to approve this application as submitted before us, with the condition that's submitted by staff that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated July 31st as submitted, as well as our regular condition that approval will expire within 2 years if the development has not proceeded and/or a building permit not issued. And with that, I'll leave it out for discussion.
Thank you, Ms. McKell, for your recommendation. Is discussion on recommendation? Mr. Charlevoix?
Mr. Chairman, I'm actually going to support this application also, and I just want to add to it that we sometimes get confused with, and much like the application that came before, we get confused with this idea of what is residential floor area. And the real purpose of it is to regulate it, is basically to assist in mitigating the overall massing of the building. So the position of the town is not that an applicant can't come forward and ask for a little bit more residential floor area, but that they have to incorporate into their design things that mitigate against the massing. And I would say in this particular case, as we've heard from Mr. Hicks, that he's done a very reasonable job in offsetting on the side yard set line or sidelines, the reducing the height of the building, as was mentioned by my colleague, incorporating different things into the roof lines. I think he's done a good job of making this happen, and I have to take it all into account too with respect to this particular bylaw and how it's done, which is the idea that in this particular case, there will be residential floor area that isn't livable floor area. It's just massing floor area. But I would say he's done a very good job of doing that, and therefore I think he meets the intent of the bylaw, which is why I'm going to support this.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, okay, the recommendation is to approve the application subject to the two conditions we heard. All those in support? No one opposed. Your application has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
Thank you. Okay, we'll proceed to application CAVA 152-2017. This is at 248 Westwood Drive. Good evening, sir. Can we have your name and address for the record?
Yes, it's Tom Budkovic at 248 Westwood Drive.
Okay. Anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 152-2017 at 248 Westwood Drive? Members have been in your hands. Staff are recommending approval. You've done your site visit, read the staff report. I don't believe we've had any letters one way or another on this one. Sir, our procedural bylaw allows us to dispense with the full presentation where it's warranted. Is there anything you wish to add beyond what we know already?
Just if you have any questions at this point, I don't know how much you looked at it. And
Oh, yeah, we've done our site visit,
Okay,
read our
yeah.
staff report. We're familiar with the property. Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
I do have one
Charlotte.
question which I can direct to whoever can understand.
Let's hear your question and I'll help you.
I'll direct it to you then, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to understand with respect to the square footage of the garages, because bear with me as I understand this thing. What we really have are 3 garages, one of 2 cars and one of 1 car.
Correct.
And yet the staff comments say that the allowable square footage of a garage, which is 45 square meters, is not being violated. But when I look at the garages, so one of the garages is 39, and one of them is 30. So each individually, they're not exceeding the 45, but together they obviously constitute more. And I was just trying to understand that concept before I can feel like I can make a decision.
By the way, that's a new bylaw that's under appeal. Bylaw 2017-25. So it's a bylaw to amend 2014-14 and it's under appeal.
Is that bylaw?
Yeah. Section 581B or D, maximum of 1 detached garage per dwelling shall be permitted, and it's bylaw 2017-25, and it's I guess a new provision that's going into 2014-14. So I guess there was no regulation before in terms of how many
So
garages you can have on
It's
the
just a
property.
line at the end of your first paragraph. The staff note that the proposed garages comply with the maximum garage floor area.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Charlevoix. I believe it was outstanding from the 2014 that, similar to the way it was interpreted by Mr. Charlevoix, that it was based on the individual garage as opposed to the cumulative on that. That's my understanding. And staff did review the application in that context, and if that had been an issue, that would have been raised by our zoning staff who do review the applications when they come in.
So I guess because the garages are split, they count as 2, although collectively they're okay in terms of floor area, but when they're split, then they're counted as 2 garages, and there's a new zoning bylaw provision which staff don't talk about, but it seems to be a new provision under appeal that talks about that. I'm not quite sure if I have that history right. Am I correct in that, sir?
My understanding is that each garage is looked at individually as far as square footage is.
Right,
That's all I understand.
Individually and collectively, they don't exceed the gross floor area, but the fact is, because they're split, they're counted as 2.
Correct.
So if you had a 2-car garage all on one side, you'd be okay, but because you have a 1-car garage and a 1-car garage, then they're 2 separate, and you're only allowed 1.
Correct.
And so, yeah. Does that help you, Mr. Charlevoix? So let me just check something. 581D. seems to be a new provision put in. I'll just check to confirm whether that was the one that was put in by that new bylaw, 581D.
I know some people call the second garage a workshop, so I didn't call it a workshop. I'm just telling you what it is.
Yeah, the other reason I raise it is because many of the presentations here that we hear all the time is that the intent of the size of the garage is to make sure it doesn't appear as if it's a three-car garage. So this appears like it's a three-car garage.
So I'm reading 581D from the zoning bylaw, and it's a general provision. It's a subsection C above shall not apply to visitors' parking spaces. And C says the cumulative width of all parking spaces on a lot shall not exceed the maximum width of the driveway. And it says bylaw 2017-25 under appeal. I'm not quite sure how that relates, but in any event, it seems like staff have no concern with the variance, given their position on the staff report. So here's the the staff report says variance number 1, the applicant is seeking relief from zoning bylaw 2014 as amended by bylaw 2014-25. And the notice says 2017-25. Which one is it?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that was a typo, and that should say 2017.
In the staff report?
In the one in the staff report.
Is there any chance you can get a copy of 2017-25?
We can have that circulate to the committee.
Yeah, okay, just for the next thing, because it seems like there's one that's maybe coming before us again. We should probably have it, just to understand
Certainly.
what it says.
It was an omnibus bylaw, which
Oh,
has
it was.
cleaned up a number of items throughout the entire comprehensive 2014-14.
I see,
Several
okay.
months ago.
Okay, and then one of those changes may have been the split garages, they count separate?
Yes.
Gotcha, all right, understood. Mr. Charlebois? We're missing a little bit of that zoning history, so it's fair that you raise it.
No, I went looking for it actually on the internet, the interweb, but I couldn't find it.
You went looking on it on the interweb?
Yes. So just so I understand,
Try the
then,
internet.
the intent of the cleanup bylaw is to permit two separate, the town's stance is that it wants to permit two separate garages, and that they think it's okay, but since it's under appeal, it's going to require a variance. Is that my understanding? The new bylaw, the cleanup bylaw, the town's recommendation is that two separate garages can be permitted in certain circumstances, whatever they might be, but in this particular case, because it's not passed yet, since it's under appeal, this requires a variance to make it happen? Is that my understanding?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, my apologies. I don't have it in front of me either, so I can't remember exactly how it looked at. But
Well, it's quite simple. It says, the variance says, there's a maximum of one attached private garage per dwelling shall be permitted. One, because these garages are split. They've been determined for zoning purposes as being two separate garages. And there's reference to omnibus zoning bylaw 2017-25 that is under appeal, that somehow amends section 581D that says you need a variance because you don't comply with that. So while collectively the garages meet the maximum garage requirements, but because they're a split, there are two, and you're allowed one per dwelling. That's what that says, I believe. Yeah, that's not the one. Yeah, so that's, yeah. Yeah, so click on that. Yeah, so that's what we need. Anyways, we're gonna get that bylaw for future education purposes.
This must
Any
be a
further
first.
questions? All right, so we'll take this matter in committee. We'd like to move a recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Telesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did look at this with some concern when I first read it, but having read the staff report, visited the site, seeing that there's other three-car garages on the same street, and recognizing that if there was a very minor design change made to this house, those garages would be connected and we wouldn't be having this discussion. So I believe that is really quite technical in nature. Mr. Chair, I find that the application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, so I'd recommend its approval, subject to development proceeding in general accordance with the drawings permitted, and that a permit issue within 2 years.
Okay, so discussion on that recommendation? See none, all those in support? No one opposed. Oh, you oppose? Okay, so approve by MT, all in support. Mark Charlevoix opposes. Sir, your application's been approved.
Approved. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good night.
We'll bring our secretary treasurer up to speed. So Mr. Talowski moved approval subject to our 2 standard conditions. Everyone supported except Mr. Charlevoix, who opposed. That application's been approved. And thank you for this bylaw. Okay. Let's move forward to the next application, CAV 153-2017 at 200 Wellesley Road. Good evening. Name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Visser. I'm at 152 West Side Drive. I'm the applicant for this project. I have a drawing. It is a finished basement apartment that has been built without permit. We are in the process of, we have applied for a building permit, and obviously there were some issues, and that's why we're here tonight to ask that you approve the additional 10 square meters that we
Okay.
have gone above in size.
Okay, let's just see if there's a need for any further elaboration on your presentation. Is anyone here this evening that has an interest in the application, CAV 153-2017 at 200 Wellesley Road? Sir, are you here in a position or support?
I'm supporting, so.
You're a supporter? Well, why don't you come down, since you're on the same side of the fence here, and just register your name and address, and we'll dispense of a full formal presentation on that basis. Can we get your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Pierre Giroir. I'm at 200 River Oaks East. I'm kind of wearing 2 hats here.
What's your first hat?
Well, the first is River Oaks Association of Residents, and we have not seen any comments from any of the members, essentially because I don't think any of the changes affects the outside of the building in any substantial way. It doesn't seem to affect the neighborhood.
Okay, so what's your second hat?
Pardon?
You said you're wearing 2 hats.
Well, my other hat is I'm backdoor neighbor.
Oh, okay. All right.
And frankly, I don't see anything which would make any substantial change to enjoyment of our area.
Okay.
And frankly, my understanding is that this is a basically an in-law suite. And I can understand that somebody want to have a decent size, safe suite for, in this case, mother-in-law. So I can't see how I can object to that either.
Apple pie and motherhood, as they say, right?
Yeah,
All right.
Yes.
Any questions? So again, just polling, anyone else have an interest in application CAV 153-2017 at 200 Wellesley Road? You do? Well, I'm the owner. Well, okay, well, you're represented. Might as well register your name, but you have your agent here.
Yeah, so I don't really have much more to say than what she already presented. My name is Zenobia Loff.
Okay.
And it's 200 Wembley Road.
Okay. Perfect. We'll take this matter to committee now and we'll proceed on the decision. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle, is that you making waves down there? I can't see that well.
I didn't, but I will put forward a motion at your request. Having reviewed the materials, heard the submissions, I'm quite satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the for test of the act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval.
You need a building permit for this, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Subject to the plans and building permit?
thank you, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay, so standard two conditions? All right, discussion recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application's been approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, application CAV A 154, 2017. This is the matter at 521 Weir Avenue. Good evening, sir, again.
Good evening, sir. For the record, my name is Greg Callahan. I act as agent for Monica Watson.
Thank you,
This
sir.
application.
Okay, so let's just see, is anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 154, 2017
That's
at
my client.
521 Weir Avenue? Okay. Which way is
She's
your
client.
interest?
That's my client.
That's your client, okay. Right.
She supports it.
That's how you get your bills paid. Okay, so we'll note that for the record that
I
your
also have
client's
a
here in
letter of,
support, but from Monica Watson, and you have some letters of support, did you say?
I have a letter of support from the neighbor to the left.
Okay, so that would be at
527.
517? 517?
Yeah, if I
All
could
right,
submit
we'll get that. So is there anything you wish to add, sir? Any questions, any items of clarification? No? Let's move on to recommendation then. Ms. McHale? Sorry? Oh, sorry, question. Yeah. You know what happens? The curvature here is such that I only see Mark. We should probably rearrange the table next time.
Yeah.
There you go, that's from height.
Yeah.
After
Or
so many
Mark
years,
needs
I'm
to
gonna
get a
rearrange
haircut.
the table. Shuffle the deck.
It's on the interweb.
Yes, Mr. Telesky, go ahead.
So, question of clarification, Mr. Callahan, you can answer it, or Mr. Charles. If I'm understanding the bylaw correctly, if this was an unattached accessory building, it's not allowed to have a dwelling in it.
That's correct.
But by the pure virtue of it now being deemed attached to the dwelling, it's allowed a accessory dwelling unit.
That's correct.
I guess where I'm having concern with this is, and what the variance is actually asking us to do, is to approve a dwelling unit with a .81 side yard setback and a 1.2 rear yard setback. And that, I'm struggling with how that is desirable, that we're basically, if approving this, we're approving a house with those kind of setbacks.
Well, it's a reuse of a building that's been there for approximately 30 years. They're changing the use of that premises into a single one bedroom, it's a bachelor basically, studio apartment for her son. And the garage at the front was added to replace the garage that was there. And the dwelling unit itself, the accessory apartment, isn't a variance in itself. It's strictly the conversion of the detached, as you're aware, the detached to an attached structure.
I appreciate that the dwelling unit is permitted as of right, but I'm struggling with it meeting the intent of the bylaw to have a dwelling unit with a 1 meter rear yard setback. And how does that meet the intent of the bylaw? Or for that matter, a .81 is not as significant on a side yard, but that's a significant reduction of a rear yard to a dwelling unit.
Well, it's for a structure that's only 20 feet wide, and it's the rest of the rear yard is excessive, and the structure or the unit that is being accommodated within that garage will not have a rear yard in that 1.2 side. Quite frankly, it's a side yard, and the rear yard will face into the existing rear yard of the dwelling. So the unit is provided with a rear yard. I understand it's not the 7.5 that's required. It's an existing structure, so we weren't going to sort of remove the structure and build it forward.
But most of the spaces are internalized. They don't have separate addresses. They're all connected internally. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it's all one unit. It's just an accessory apartment. It's just because of the height, the basement height ceiling, it's not being accommodated in the basement. It's a bungalow. The opportunity was there to, a structure that it's been there for some time. The opportunity was, presented itself that it could be used as an accessory structure in terms of compliance with the bylaw. And the coverage meets the bylaw requirements, and it would seemed appropriate. From the street, it looks as if it's a bungalow with an attached garage.
So I guess what Mr. Terlewski's, I'm trying to read his mind, and that's always dangerous reading someone else's mind. He's saying that if it's a dwelling unit, call it an accessory dwelling unit, but it's a dwelling unit. Dwelling units require certain regulations like rear yard, for amenity space and all that. But this is an accessory dwelling unit. In other words, it doesn't function as an independent. It's an accessory to an existing dwelling unit. It's almost like a granny flat or a granny suite or second suite, whatever the situation is. And you're saying functionally the accessory unit, if I'm reading you right, it functions together with the main dwelling unit, and they would share the rear yard space.
That's correct. It's not an independent unit as if it was in this situation it isn't. Although, if it was passed on to another owner in the future, then obviously the arrangement could be somewhat a little different. This is
right. It's not being severed for the purpose of creating a second unit, because that would be a freestanding unit. It's an accessory to a dwelling unit, a second suite. It's a second suite, basically, is it not?
It is an accessory unit. There's no discussion as to whether the unit is an accessory unit, quote unquote, as per the bylaw. The zoning allows for the accessory dwelling unit. It's just in terms of its location and the way it's being constructed here. The garage was a large garage, quite frankly, for the area or for the property, and it was a good opportunity to use that space to create the apartment because it can't be accommodated in the basement. And
Okay.
that's the reason why the proposal is this.
Mr. Telesky, you had more comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, so you don't have to try to read my mind. I'll
No,
try
no,
to
thank
pose
you.
this in a question to Mr. Charles. The accessory dwelling unit is not permitted in the building that it's proposed to be in today. But because of a technical interpretation, by putting a roof over the walkway, it now becomes part of the dwelling. How does that use suddenly become appropriate when it's not permitted in the garage as it exists today, but if you put a roof over a walkway, it's a technicality and suddenly it's appropriate? Why is it appropriate to have a residential use in that dwelling with the kind of setbacks that are being proposed, or in that structure with the kind of setbacks that are being proposed? That's what I'm struggling with. It's a technical interpretation that suddenly changes the permitted use.
Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the easy questions. The way that staff had looked at it, to my understanding, and I do have to give credit to Ms. Mahavlich, who had provided the comments to the committee, is it was recognizing that it was an accessory building before, which had a reduced permissions in terms of a setback to the rear yard. Rather than 7.5, it is permitted, or was built at the time in consideration of what the regulations were. By virtue, yes, of attaching the structure now to the house, it forms part of the house, and it happens to be that it is now used for a dwelling unit in and of itself. So what I can say is staff have looked at it from their perspective. It still meets the intent. That is still part of the house, is by virtue of the construction of how what was previously an accessory building being attached would, in staff's opinion, still meet the intent of the bylaw and the neighborhood.
That's the answer you're going to get on this one.
If I could add also that the lot configuration, that come up, yeah. The rear property lines at the back is approximately there. There is a structure for this person that owns this property here. There's an accessory structure here, and there is also an accessory structure right there. And when we looked at this project, it didn't seem to be an actual intrusion, quote unquote, into those privacy areas or the amenity area space that was created in their backyard. There won't be any windows, of course, across that back wall, and neither is there any windows along the north-facing wall either.
Okay. Any further questions? Mr. Charlevoix?
I'm just going to pick up on Mr. Tulowski's thing because, you know, I got to compliment him. I wasn't it doesn't read this way, and now I think I understand what he's looking at. So I guess I need to, for discussion purposes, throw this thing out in. One question for staff. Right now, you're approving this thing as an accessory building. If the applicant decides not to make it an accessory building and make it their primary living space, then are they permitted to do so? Are we agreeing that this will become part of the dwelling?
Can I, you know, we're asking legal questions, and we're asking what the intent of people's ambitions are in the future, but.
No, I'm not asking for
but let me just finish, because I think it goes to your point. This is an accessory dwelling unit. If it was to come forward together with the severance, then I think it's a different consideration. So as long as it remains as one lot, you have two dwelling units on a lot, and I don't think the bylaws dictates which one. In fact, we're approving this on an accessory basis. If the resident decides, well, I'm going to occupy this as my primary residence, someone else can occupy that, that's a decision they can make. I don't think the bylaw regulates that.
That's what I was just trying to
It
clarify.
is always required to be subordinate.
So in actual fact, what we're really approving here is that we will accept this as a dwelling at this shape. Going back to what Mr. Tulowski was saying, if we weren't even talking about this being an in-law suite or whatever, we would simply say,
it's a dwelling unit.
we want to make a house, and we want the house to look like this.
It's like
Any house.
it's like a guest house on top of a garage in River Oaks.
It's just a primary house. It doesn't have to be used as a guest house. It can be used as a guest house, but it doesn't have
It's
to
a
be
dwelling
used.
unit, a self-contained dwelling unit. It's got a
But it does-
kitchen, dining room, living room, bedroom, and
All
a
right,
washroom.
so the question I have, though, is simply, does it have to be used, or are we giving it permission to be used? So if it doesn't have to be used, then it's just a primary unit. It can be used or
It's a
not
second
used.
unit.
But it doesn't have to be used.
No.
As a second unit. In other words, one person could live in the front and in the back. It's okay. They could do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be anybody else. That's what
No,
I'm trying to clarify. Okay.
They can choose to occupy all the space or have an in-law or someone else, maybe even rent it. There's nothing to prevent that. And you comply with the parking requirements for a second dwelling unit and all that?
Yes.
Yeah. Any further questions? Okay. Mr. Charles, you think you had easy, hard questions today. We're having hard decisions to make too, so this is just par for the course. So who would like to move a recommendation on this? So, but why don't I give you, Ms. Mikhail, the chair, while I move a recommendation on this, on application CAVA 155.
That makes it easy for me, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
54.
Sorry?
I said that makes it easy for me. Go ahead.
Well, it's just so we can get the ball rolling here. So on application CAVA 150, sorry, I'm just getting a little bit mixed up here, 154, 2017 at 521 Weir Avenue.
Yeah.
I move the approval of the application on the basis that I find this form level of intensification is appropriate. It's a secondary accessory dwelling unit, albeit technically made to be accessory by connection with the garage and the roof, as we found through the discussion. But this is a kind of intensification that I think is modest and appropriate in the context of trying to provide dwelling units that are sympathetic, compatible with neighborhoods. And I feel that it meets all all 4 tests and find that the approval will complement and not in any way destabilize the character of the neighborhood. So on that basis, I recommend approval subject to the 2 conditions, the plans and 2 years. You have to do the rest of your job.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to go on record that I was also leaning towards supporting this application, albeit that I understand where Mr. Tlowski and Mr. Charlotte are coming from, having a dwelling unit without any rear yard setbacks. But given the fact that we see that there are other accessory structures in the locations where that rear yard setback would come into play, I'm fully supportive of this application. Are there any other further further discussion on this recommendation?
Sorry, John. Would you want to go first?
It's okay.
We'll go one by one.
Madam Chair, not surprisingly, I can't support the recommendation for approval. This is not an accessory dwelling unit or accessory structure like the accessory sheds in the adjoining yards. I see no relevance to that comparison made by the applicant. This is a garage. It's not a living space. This variant is turning that garage into a living space. The way I'm looking at this is the same way I look at something if it comes in that needed a permit that got built. You have to look at it. If it wasn't there, would you approve it? And what this variance is asking us to do is to approve a new dwelling that's almost 20 meters long with a 0.81 meter side yard setback and a 1.2 meter rear yard setback. I cannot see how you can approve a new dwelling with those kind of setbacks, this kind of configuration, and determine that it meets the intent of the zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Tlowski. Mr. Hardcastle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In light of those comments, I should have perhaps spoken ahead of Mr. Tlowski. I'm going to take a different position than Mr. Tlowski in terms of this is an adaptive reuse of existing facilities on the site, accommodating for and allowing for a low-scale intensification of the site. And really what it comes down to, in my view, is looking at an existing situation and trying to understand what the impacts are going to be on adjacent properties. In terms of the components of the building that are located closest to the property line, they're substantially unchanged through the proposal. The windows are located internal to the yard, et cetera. So in terms of any impacts upon adjacent properties that would be had in this scenario, they're minimal, if any. And there's a substantial yard area available for the secondary unit to utilize. On that basis, I'm going to support the motion that's on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Harker. And last but not least, Mr. Charlebois.
I don't have to. No, this is a good one, actually. You know, there's a lot I like about this particular design, and I agree. It's you know, in many respects, it's a great use of the site, and I've heard some of the pros and the cons, but I too, like Mr. Tlowski, I got to look at this thing as if it was being presented to me. Can I build a house that looks like this? And on that basis, I don't think I would approve it in terms of coming in. And the other thing that I don't think I would approve is if people came to me, you know, continuously and said, I want to connect my garage to my house and turn it into a part of my house. I don't think I'd be looking at it quite so easily either. So on that basis, I'm not going to support it either.
Okay, as per the discussions on the floor, the motion is to approve this application with the set conditions. Those in support? of the approval? And those who are opposed? Mr. Zalowski and Mr. Charlebois. Sir, your motion has been, your application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. we'll
Mr.
move on.
Chairman, I'll hand it back
Thank
to you.
Thank you. I hope I can do just as well as you have. CAVA 156, 2017 at 448 Maple Avenue.
Arlene Beaumont appearing for Bill Outred, W.E. Outred and Associates. We are the agents for the owners of 448 Maple. We were here back in February, and Mr. Outred got variances approved for garage area and height of the dwelling. When we went to make our building permit submission a couple of months ago, that pesky bylaw 2017-25 had been approved by council. And the way that the gross floor area for this building was calculated is different now under 207025. And we have to include some areas in the garage, over the garage area.
So you're not seeking a variance from 201725, are you? Why are you not seeking a variance to it? It's not.
We are seeking a variance to it.
It's not shown on your list of variances, just like the other one. The other one has specifically had 20715. In fact, I found a provision. That's why we had it printed while we were on a very, very minor hiatus. Which section of 201725 is problematic for you?
Well, I'm just reading the staff comments here, and it mentions 20.
Yeah, it does mention it, but it's not
Since
mentioned
this
in the.
time, bylaw 207025 was approved by council, which amended bylaw 201014.
Right.
The amendment changed the method for calculating residential floor area, resulting in the proposed dwelling being over the maximum area by 7.4 meters squared.
Right. So you can seek a variance to a bylaw that was enacted but still under appeal, like the other applicant sought a variance to 21725.
Yes. There was been two others this evening that have had this issue with
Yeah. Well, I don't know the
revised
other
way
ones,
of.
but I know your notice doesn't set out 21725.
I can't speak to that. I don't know why that would be.
So even if we proceed and, well, Mr. Charles? Was just the oversight in the notice, or, I mean, clearly the staff report speak to 2017-25.
Another very good question, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if 2017-025 was what.
You know what, we'll
created
proceed
the
with the
issue.
application because it doesn't seem, but I don't know if it's at your risk. You may need to come back again and redo it if 2017-25 needs to be amended and you haven't amended it. So, I think everyone should look at these notices to ensure they get the correct ones. But in any event, we'll proceed on the basis of the way that it's structured, and you'll have to do your magic with building department if it's an issue. I certainly don't want to make it an issue, I'm just raising it.
Well, 2017-25 is not currently in full force and effect because it is under appeal.
No, but you can seek you can seek a variance to an enacted but under appeal bylaw, just like the previous applicant did.
Okay.
So what you're saying is 2014, you were fine, you did your calculations, you got a variance approval. Lo and behold, council passes a new bylaw 2017-25 and you're caught by it, right? So you're caught by the new bylaw and you need to seek variance to the new bylaw. It should have been noticed here, but maybe I'm wrong. So we'll just leave it like that, we'll proceed. But maybe it's a discussion you should have with the building department.
Thank you, we will do
Okay, so we'll take it under advisement. Is anyone here that has an interest in application CAVA 156-2017 at 448 Maple Avenue? Okay, so we understand. Who would like to move a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to ask a question, just because it's been one of those evenings. Since we're going to amend 2014-14, or we're being requested to amend 2014-14 to give a higher percentage, I guess by, in so doing, would that then make the building big enough to comply with 2017-25?
Well, what I hear is nothing changes, except that under the new bylaw, you're .75 more. You got approved at 38, and you need 38.75 because of all the other exclusions that are included in GFA.
That's correct.
And that's all as a result of the definition of residential floor area, what's included, what's not included. Are you subject to that 6-meter difference height and all that?
Okay, then you know what? Here's what I'm going to do in this particular case, Mr. Chairman. Having conducted my site visit, read the staff report, I note that the town is in agreement with this and that the public hasn't supported it. I do find that there is some discrepancy between the interpretation of what could be done. However, I also am of the opinion, as I think about it, that if I was being asked to amend bylaw 2014-14 and increase it to 38.75, that I would be approving it. So on that basis, I am going to put forward a motion that that this particular application be approved, finding it meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act, making it subject to the condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated July 14th, 2017, and making it further subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision. The proposed development does not proceed and or building permit is not issued.
Discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application being approved.
Thank you very much.
But do make an inquiry whether you need a variance to 2017-25, because we might find you back here, or you may need to appeal just to add it, because we have no power to add variances.
We will do so. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I just ask Mr. Charles, just on the record, that if bylaws that are being enacted that are coming before us for variances, that we should maybe get those bylaws and a little heads up so we can understand the context of these changes? Okay, thank you.
And could I also note that I tried to find this particular bylaw on the Town of Oakville's website, but I couldn't find it. Yeah, well, okay, then it was difficult for me to find it then.
You were on the interweb, go on the internet.
You know, that is
Maybe that will help you. So
very-
application CAVA 157-2017 at 390 Spruce Street. You should keep that. No, keep it. Yes, sir, name and address for the record.
Yes, thank you. My name is Rick Intelligent, and my address is 79 Wilson Street, Suite 301, Oakville, Ontario. And I appear this evening on behalf of our clients, Glenn and Lorraine Yates, at 390 Spruce Avenue.
All right, let's see if there's anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 157-2017 at 390 Spruce Street. Seeing none, this is recommended for approval. Members, you've done your site visit, read the staff report, studied the application, the plan. Sir, have you had anything to add to the application?
At this time, no, thank you.
Any questions, any items of clarification required? See none? Okay, then we'll proceed to a recommendation. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle, is that you looking down the table at me?
And waving my hand, yes, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. Having reviewed the materials, undertaken my site visit, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to 2 conditions. The first being that the proposed additions be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated July 27, 2017 as submitted. The second being that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. I would note that there are no members of the public present to make deputations in this matter.
Okay, thank you for that. Discussion on recommendation? See none. All those in support, subject to those 2 conditions. No one opposed. The application being approved, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, application CAVA 158-2017 at 395 Aspen Forest Drive.
Good evening. My name is Darren Smith. I'm the agent for the owner. Address is 453 Brand Street in Burlington.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 158-2017 at 395 Aspen Forest Drive? Okay, see none. Again, I'm going to poll the committee members. You wish a presentation, done your site visit, read the staff report, study the plans. Anything you wish to add, sir, to the application?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, so who would like to make a recommendation? Mr. Telesky?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm going to move this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act and it presents a more attractive streetscape than what exists there today as a result of the variances with a nominal increase in square footage. I would make that approval subject to development proceeding in general accordance with the drawings provided and that a permit issue within 2 years.
Okay, discussion on a recommendation? See none, all those in support, subject to those 2 conditions. No one opposed, so your application being approved.
Thank you very much.
Okay, application CAV 159-2017 at 1380 Spears Road. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Craig Esposti. I'm with John Wilmot Architect. We're the agent for Mr. Dave Warren, who's the owner of Total Tech Pools, located at 1380 Spears Road.
Okay, again, is anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 159-2017 at 1380 Spears Road, Unit 1 to 4?
Dave Warren, 14 Highland Road, Oakville. I'm the owner of Total Tech Pools.
Is your agent?
This is my agent, yeah.
And you support what your agent's going to say?
I hope so. If
Okay.
not, he's in trouble.
All right, so members, do you need a presentation on this? You read the staff report, studied the application, did your site visit, any items of clarification, anything that you need to?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, there's one other person supporting us. Do you need his information? Or?
Well, Mr. Robinson, we recognize you, sir, as here, and you're here in support as a.
Yes, I am. I spent considerable time in his facility and I find the service and everything all good. It needs to be expanded.
Thank you, sir. We'll note that for the record. So, a need for a presentation? Sir, we're familiar with the application. You see the conditions that are proposed by staff?
Yeah, that's the, if I
Do you need a
may,
building
sir.
permit? Do you need a building permit for any of this?
We do, yes.
Yeah, you do. Okay, so, okay, well, let's see where the recommendation is.
Sorry, sir, can I make one quick comment though about the staff recommendations?
Sure.
If the committee decides to approve tonight, we are aware of the staff comments and they're generally in support, which is great. We do request that maybe the committee would consider not including the 2 staff recommendations subject to the approval for the removal of the encroachment of the parking area and the need for approval by Conservation Halton. Strictly as the proposed work is all interior to the building, it's really a request for an increase in area for retail use. The extra work to the exterior to modify the parking area and remove the encroachments is potentially quite onerous to the owner and not really related to the proposed work. So we would request that if they're willing to consider that, that be not be subject to the conditions put forward by planning staff.
So can you flash the plans up there? Show us where the encroachment is.
The encroachments are
right down
this area here.
All those areas that you marked in gray?
Yes, and they're just what it is. It's existing paving that is just, from what I understand from Mr. Warren, over time the paving is encroached as they've redone it. It's obviously gone beyond the property line. We obviously don't need more parking spaces. The lot has adequate parking for the proposed work, but staff have.
But here's our problem, sir. Just to cut to the chase, we have no power to authorize encroachments.
No, and I understand that and I agree. It's what it is. It's an existing condition. When we started this discussion, we actually approached zoning, and zoning had initially told us that this was an existing. You can consider it legal non-conforming, and that it was just an existing condition that wouldn't be an issue. It only was raised in the last couple of days when we received the comments from planning staff that they were making it a condition
but they're
to be
encroachments.
removed. They are, but they're
They're
existing.
encroachments beyond your property limits.
They are. You're right.
And so the town is saying, much like they say anywhere else, you encroach on lands beyond. They can't authorize, or I don't know how we can authorize a variance that encroaches into abutting lands. None of your parking spaces are affected. You still maintain all those parking counts, right?
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
So it's area beyond that. So it's not something we can deal with. The town is giving you a fair heads-up warning that they want those removed. Now, maybe
So I wasn't sure if it was something that was,
What do you recommend instead? Because we can't authorize encroachments, and if you're recommending that the encroachments be dealt with to the satisfaction of Director of Planning and Halton Conservation Authority, maybe that gives you an opportunity to go talk to them.
right, and we're prepared to do that. We thought if it was at least not made as a condition of the variance approval, then it's just a matter of a discussion that we would have with planning staff and conservation, whether it be required there. But as soon as it became a condition of the variance approval.
But they're saying that the existing parking area on the southeast and west portions be revised, parking areas, so I'm not quite sure what that refers to.
Well, these are, actually I have a couple of photos that may help, but.
No, I remember the site. I mean, it's not apparent when you're there because it flows into one.
Right, and it's the parking area or the paving area to the rear of the lot, if you remember from your site visit, where it basically goes up against the natural woodland area.
Yeah.
That's just, the property line is a couple of meters back from that. The actual property line property line is a few meters back from that edge of parking. It's like I said, it's an existing, I agree, yes.
It's someone else's property, not yours.
Yep.
And
What we're requesting is we
You gotta-
recognize, and I do apologize for, I think what we're requesting, we recognize we potentially will, in the process of applying for the permit, require Conservation Halton to be involved. And they might very well request that be dealt with. We're just trying to keep it out at this stage. We still have to go through all the legalities of getting a permit, and part of the permit, because of the abutment against Conservation Halton land, it in all likelihood will trigger Conservation Halton wanting to review it and potentially even and getting permission from them. But to actually put it as a requirement for the variance just makes it a little more difficult for us.
what's in the area of encroachment?
It's relatively small. The problem I run
No,
into...
but what's in that area? Maybe put the plan up.
Asphalt.
It's just paving. It's paved
Yeah.
area.
So they want it reinstated with soft landscaping.
Yeah, the issue is it's, unfortunately, I don't own the building, and over the years, the landlord has repaved, et cetera, and there's actually a bank at that point. And the reality of it is, I believe if we deal directly with Conservation Halton, I believe the paving is probably helping as a form of retention because there's erosion happening on their property. We're very cognizant of the Conservation Halton land to the extent where we've actually approached and offered the labor to clean up down there because it's been a dump over the years, people dumping sofas, et cetera, and they have declined that at this point. But it's just the cost that we would have to incur if we had to cut all that out and bring it to the standards that is our concern at this point.
Well, this is the owner here.
You wouldn't be approving an encroachment, absolutely not. It would be just keeping it from because really all we're doing is interior work.
So Mr. Charles again, another easy question. Would it, under the circumstances, to give the applicant an opportunity to negotiate perhaps a retention of that encroachment area, or maybe not, that the condition be reworded that the area of parking encroachment be dealt with to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and the Halton Conservation Authority. So if they say no, reinstate, it gets reinstated. If they say yes, maintain, they can be maintained. Is there a downside to amending that condition to one that allows for the opportunity for discussion to the satisfaction of the two main principal parties?
That, I believe, Mr. Chairman, would be at the committee's discretion if you'd like to reword the condition like that. We would be dealing with the condition one way or the other. The one thing I would note is that we would want to see what the previous site plan, if there is one that's affecting this site, that we would just be reinforcing whatever that permission was previously.
Fair enough. Yeah, so you may have another added tool to your advantage, the enforcement of the site plan agreement. And you would require the approval of Conservation Authority in any event for either.
I believe so. I mean, it's difficult for me to look at and say all we're doing is literally moving a couple of walls and putting interior work, and why the impact is on the conservation, which we aren't really having anything to do with. I recognize it's an opportunity to take an existing encroachment. It's an opportunity to try and enforce an encroachment because we're the first ones who've actually applied for a permit to do work there. So I recognize that there's nothing that can be done about that. That is part of the process.
Yeah, so I mean, we can't sanction or do
No,
anything
no,
with
I
the
realize
encroachment. It is, if there's an encroachment, there's ways to deal with it, either by requiring strict compliance with the site plan, or through a process like this, the town becomes aware of an encroachment, they require it to be resubstituted, but you're saying give us an opportunity to work it out. You're not adverse to reinstating it, but you want to have the discussion to see whether you
Correct.
can maintain it, do something else compatible or comparable.
Correct.
But ultimately, it would be to the discretion of the Director of Planning and the Halton Region
It
Conservation.
would be Halton Region Conservation Authority, I believe, who would have the jurisdiction
And the
over
Director
that.
of Planning, they want to make sure that it meets the requirements as well. Okay, we'll
We're
take.
just between a rock and a hard place in the sense that I didn't build
I
that
hear you,
parking
you
lot.
want
and I
unit 1
wouldn't
to
have-
4, you don't want to be dealing with the problems for the whole property.
Right.
Yeah, you're sort of confined, but you're here representing, in fact, the owner, so
Exactly.
the owner should be aware that there's these things that need to be cleaned up.
Yeah.
All right. Members, you heard the discussion mostly with the condition.
So, Mr. Chairman, what are you suggesting that the
I'm
condition be
suggesting that
amended?
condition number 1
Yeah,
be revised to say that the area of parking encroachments, so we're sort of giving the applicant and the owner a heads up that the encroachment area is a concern, and it needs to be dealt with to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and the Halton Conservation District, Halton Conservation Authority. So to allow the applicant or the agent, the owner, to go to the two parties and say, okay, what can we do about this? And then if they're satisfied, however they're satisfied, then that condition gets cleared.
so
So the
basically,
condition currently worded is very specific, remove
Yeah,
it and reinstate it.
right. So you're saying that the encroachments in the existing parking area to the southeast and west portions of the property be
Be dealt with to the
be
satisfaction
To the
of-
satisfaction of the,
yeah.
dealt with, okay, to the satisfaction of Director of Planning and Halton Conservation.
So what we're doing is we're not specifying what needs to be done.
Mhm.
That's subject to the discussions that need to happen, and if Director of Planning is satisfied to remove them, and that's the only way he'll be satisfied, then they need to be removed.
That would be.
And then the second condition,
Should remain, because there may be grading involved.
but only if they have to do it.
Well, no, I think conservation, the Halton,
See, we've already got the Halton Conservation Authority in the first
Well,
one. I
yeah.
think you can drop the second one.
yeah, the second one is redundant.
It
because
is
it's saying-
redundant, given the wording
It's
of the
saying you
first
need a
one.
building permit, well, we know that, you know. And I guess subject to the 2-year condition.
I don't find it really changes.
Okay, well, that's
much,
sort of,
but yeah, okay.
the discussion we had centered all around the condition.
Yep.
So who would like to move a recommendation? We'll take this down to committee.
Sure, I'll go off with it. Mr. Chairman, having reviewed the application, visited the site, read the staff comments, and noted that there's no one from the public in support or in opposition, and taking into account the discussion that we've had here tonight, I'm prepared to put forward a motion that this particular variance be approved, finding it meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act, making a condition, subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not, or redevelopment does not proceed or building permits not issued, and making it further subject to the condition as follows, that the encroachments in the existing parking area on the southeast and west portions of the property be worked on?
No, be addressed or dealt with?
Will be addressed, I like that, will be addressed to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and the Halton Conservation Authority.
Is it Conservation Halton or Halton Conservation Authority? To the satisfaction of Conservation Halton.
To the satisfaction of Conservation Halton. Thank you.
Okay, so did you get that? Did you want to repeat it again? That the encroachments of the existing parking area on the southeast and west portions of the property be addressed to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Halton Conservation. No authority. Halton Conservation. And the regulation approval is being deleted, and the approval will expire in 2 years. So everyone understand the approval and the conditions, all those in support? No one opposed, and assuming there was no discussion on it. Okay. Your application's been approved with that one condition It doesn't take you off the hook, just for the record. It
No,
means
but
you
I
have to
appreciate
work
the
with
wording.
authorities, whatever you can hammer out.
I appreciate you making that wording, especially given the time and you want to go home, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have minutes of July 11th, 2017. Sherry and John, you were not here, so those others, including myself and Mr. Mark Charlevoix and Michael Teleski, do you, recommendation to approve?
I'll put forward a motion to approve those minutes as.
Okay,
as read.
I support it. Mr. Telowski? Okay, so the minutes of July 11th to be approved. Minutes of August 8th, 2017, I was not present, so I will refrain from voting. Those that were, who would like to move a recommendation?
Mark is moving.
Mark's moving
Mr. Chairman, I'll
recommendation.
put forward a motion to approve those minutes as presented.
Are those in support? Okay, those are being approved and adjournment. Mr. Hardcastle? Adjourn. All those in support? Let it reflect it's 9:09. Okay, we're adjourned.